If you're ready to test drive island living, but perhaps you're not quite ready to own real estate here in Belize, this session is for you. Question number 126 of our In the Inbox series is asked by Mary, and she says, how can I find a long-term rental in Belize? How can I find a long-term rental in Belize? Fantastic question, because finding a long-term rental here is typically like a scavenger hunt because we don't have a central rental platform like Zillow. It is going to take a lot more effort to find the right rental property. Now, with that being said, real estate and rental management are two completely different roles here in Belize. I know a lot of times in North America, you typically have a realtor who can show you rentals, who can show you properties for sale. But here you're going to find that those are two completely different companies. So you have a real estate agent who's responsible for helping with the sales of property here in Belize. They can help you find the right property to own. But then there's also the rental management companies. And those rental management companies are going to be focusing on renting out and maintaining properties. And they're the entity that you're going to be reaching out to about finding the right property to rent. So it is a little different here. However, you will typically find that there are real estate brokers or brokerages that do have long-term rentals available. However, that's not necessarily the norm here in Belize because the real estate companies are going to be focusing primarily on the sale of the property. Now, with that being said, we do have suggestions for you, Mary, where you're able to learn where to long-term rent from. But I'd say generally these three websites, Vacasa, Airbnb, and VRBO, are a great place to start. Airbnb, for example, they have extended stay, so you can put how long you want to be in the property for, and they'll start to give you monthly rates versus vacation nightly rates. So that's a great place to start. Start with Airbnb extended stay, and hopefully you're able to find something there. If not, what you're able to do is work with the different management companies. Again, the management companies are separate from the real estate companies. Here are a few management companies on Ambergris Caye if you're looking to be here on the island of Ambergris. So first and foremost, our sister company, Coastal Property Management. Secondly, Crown Property Management, and third, Belize Vacation Rentals. These are websites that you can go to in order to find long-term rentals. Most of the time it's updated, not always, but most of the time it's updated. But best advice is going to be to reach out to that management company directly to see what they have. If you're looking at Placencia, and this is a close second that we get requests from for people who are looking in Belize, if you're looking at Placencia, these are the two companies I found that tend to be the most reputable: Flowers Property Management and Placencia Property Rentals. So with that being said, I know there's not tons of options on here, but what you're going to tend to find is that a lot of the communications and advertisements for long-term rentals are found on Facebook. Now, if you are somebody who does not have a Facebook, I would just recommend creating a very basic profile. You don't have to add all the pictures and all of that fluff to it, but these are a handful of groups throughout the country and in the different areas that you're going to find long-term rentals are promoted. Now, I can speak from experience with us, with our long-term rental company. We've only advertised on the Facebook groups once or twice, and we get the units rented out within a couple of days. So this tends to be a very effective way for rental companies to be operating. And we do tend to find that long-term rentals here, specifically on Ambergris Caye, go pretty quickly. So if you see something, then it's always best that you start booking it for when you're ready. In addition to that, the biggest one is going to be word of mouth. So what we have seen some of our renters do or people do is they'll come down, they'll book an Airbnb for 7 days, 14 days. And then during that week or two that they're here, then they're out actively looking at properties. I know sometimes people come down 6 months in advance and they want to see rentals that are available. That's not necessarily super common here to do showings of rentals because of how quickly long-term rentals get booked out. So you're also not able to get into a property to see if it is being occupied by another long-term tenant. So typically you're going to find a lot of these companies have great photos. Hopefully they have some videos of some sort, and they're able to tell you more about the property without you physically going into it. Now, of course, if it's available, they'll take you in. If it's not, though, they're not able to get into the property. But when you're reaching out to a management company, I do have a few pieces of advice for you to make sure that you are getting the best service and attention from these companies. So number one is understand where you want to rent. Although Belize is not a huge country, we're only about the size of Massachusetts, each area is so completely different. You're going to have management companies that focus in on specific areas. It's like if somebody reached out and they said to us, reach out to a company in Massachusetts and said, hey, we want to rent in Massachusetts. Okay, where in Massachusetts do you want to go? You can go to Cambridge, you can be in Boston, you can be completely outside of the city, and you can be in Woodstock, for example, or Lexington. So many different places of Massachusetts that you can be, but it's up to you to really understand more about yourself to know where in the country you want to be. What I'll do is in the description below, I'll put a link to the 6 top hotspots where foreigners are buying. Then you can learn a little bit more about the country if you're not too familiar with it. And then from there, maybe that information will help give you some more intel about where you want to get started, at least when you're coming to rent. In addition to that, really understand what are must-haves for you in a rental, and then communicate that to the management company. So for example, if you're going to be bringing your pet down, clearly state to your company, to the company that you're reaching out to, that you need to find a rental that'll accommodate pets, because it is not completely common here for properties to be able to accommodate pets. So this is something right out of the gates that you want to be sharing. But make a list. If you're coming down with your partner or with somebody else, sit down together and make a list of what your must-haves are in that rental, but also understand you're coming to Belize, so there may need to be just a little bit of flexibility with that. All right, number 3 is, when do you want to rent? So this is a question that we actually get quite a bit. People are like, all right, we're looking for a rental, a 1-bedroom, 1-bath rental. We want to be under this budget. What's available? And the first question we ask is, when do you want to rent? Because there is going to be availability at certain times and availability not at certain times. So you do need to understand too what that stretch looks like for you, so that the management companies can show you properties that would be available then. In addition to that, you need to understand your status in Belize. If you are a foreigner, you are going to be required to rent a property that has its BTB, Belize Tourism Board hotel license. So what that means is you're going to have to pay an additional 9% BTB tax every single month. So understand that if you're somebody who has your work permit here, you have your residency, you have your citizenship in Belize, then you can rent a property long-term that does not have a BTB status. However, if you are a foreigner here, you need to find a property that has it. And typically the management companies will ask you about your status when you're going through this process, so they know where it is to place you, or if they need to be charging you that 9% hotel tax. Now, this point comes back up to, when do you want to rent? It's important for you to understand high season and low season. High season here is typically US Thanksgiving, so think November through about Easter. So think about April, May, and then there's shoulder season, which is June and July, and then really slow season, which is September, October, August, September, October, and then part of November. So understanding that there's different seasons here, what you're going to find is during high seasons, prices may be higher, and understandably so, especially if you're planning to come for 6 months at a time. Maybe during that peak season, during that high season, you may find that the long-term rental prices are higher because of that season. So understand that and budget accordingly. In addition to that, WhatsApp. I mentioned to you Facebook before, but WhatsApp is our biggest mode of communication here in Belize. So if you don't hear back from a company via email or from Facebook, find their number. They're probably on WhatsApp, and call them on WhatsApp, send them a message on WhatsApp. You will likely need to be the one doing the follow-up, simply because there are a lot of people looking for long-term rentals, especially during high season. So they're probably getting a lot of requests from a lot of different people. So you need to make sure that you're the one reaching out if you're not necessarily hearing from them. So some important tidbits for you as you are reaching out to the management companies. In addition to that, set those expectations. So here in Belize, long-term rentals are defined as 6 months or more. 6 months or more. If you're coming down for a month or 2 or 3, what you might find is that the monthly rate that they're charging you is high. And the reason for that is because it's not technically a long-term rental. So they may still be charging you for the nightly rental rate, maybe discounted a little bit, but it may not necessarily be as attractive of a rate as if you were doing it for 6 months or more. So do understand that too. 6 months or more is defined as a long-term rental. Also, utilities are not typically including, that includes internet. So, or not typically included, and that includes internet. And so I remember we had a new colleague who was moving here to Belize. She found a long-term place to rent, and then she was completely shocked that she needed to go and do her internet setup. So she just expected that it would be set up for her and she'd be ready to go and be able to jump right online, but she was trying to go through the hurdle of getting the internet set up and all of that. Now, if you're renting in a place that's within a condo, typically they have that included. but I would highly recommend that you are talking to the management company about what's included and what's not included. So typically electricity, water, that's all going to be individually metered to where you're staying. And then internet and cable may or may not be included. That definitely depends on that property. In addition to that, that comes back to what amenities are there. And I also mean by what amenities are there. Is there anything on site that you'd be maybe paying a higher monthly rate for because there's amenities? So a gym, for example, a tennis court, um, little things like that that are going to be important, especially if you're looking for some extras. Also, double check that there's hot water and air conditioning. In a lot of local living, this is not standard. If you're somebody who's coming from North America, you're probably going to be expecting hot water and air conditioning. And if it's just, again, not standard, especially when it comes to more of the local living, so understand that. And then last but not least, like we talked about, if you're a tourist, be prepared to pay the additional 9% hotel tax. That's that BTB tax that we were talking about. Coming back to the amenities, I do want to talk about this a little bit more about the hot water and air conditioning. A lot of times people are coming to us on a very strict budget. They're saying, it's okay, we'll just go where the locals go. We're fine to live with the locals. And that's really what brings up my point of the hot water and air conditioning, because that's just not something that's standard. But also understand that local living may not necessarily be the same sort of living that you're used to. So it's important for you to at least see that before you commit to something that's considered a local rental. And if you are planning to rent first in Belize, we have a great checklist that we're happy to send over to you, the Smart Renter Rental Checklist. Email us, info@lunarealtybelize.com. We'll get a copy of that over to you via email, and then you can start going through those boxes and checking off those boxes as you find the property that is right for you. With that being said, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. There's so much more to share with you. However, I think we're off to a good start here. We'll also put in the description below a link to the long-term rentals that our sister company has. I think there's only 1 out of 7 or 8 that's actually available right now. They do tend to go pretty quickly, but we'll put that in there for you to just see an example of what's on the market at this point. Once again, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we hope to see you in Belize at some point. Bye-bye.